Okay, I am working on my 924 turbo rear brakes because they are basically frozen tight. I have a place that'll turn rotors, so well, hopefully we can see if we can get these turned. But there's a spacer on here that has to come off. And then there's a screw into the rotor house, head, whatever, hat. And then you can take the caliper itself off. So that's what I'm trying to get. This thing is very tight, very frozen basically. So point being, put anti-seize on the back of these things. I'm definitely not a fan of these set screws, but a couple tips. One is to give them some penetrating fluid, a little bit. The second thing is to put the screwdriver in there and then tap it with a hammer, good and solid, a couple times. A lot of times that'll break up the crust inside. This is my second side, so I've learned a couple things. Primarily, I took the pads out. So to take the pads out, you first drive these pins out, and the spring will come and shoot you in the face. And then you can pull the pads out. They're over there. I think that looks pretty good. And this one looks fine. So let's see if I can reuse this. Maybe I'll smooth the surface down a little bit. Sandpaper or whatever. So anyway, now I'm going to step on the brake pedal, and hopefully that piston will push out. And then I can tear the piston apart and see what's inside. Okay, so you can see under there's a flexible hose is way up in there. So I got vice grips on it so it won't keep dripping. That did the trick. And here we go. First look at this piston. It's a disaster. So I'll get some stainless or some steel wool after it and see how it comes out. Might need to replace this one. We'll take a look. Alright, I went over this 2 or 3 times with steel wool, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but you can still feel stuff on here. So I think that's the rule of thumb, is if it's deep enough that you can feel it, you shouldn't redo it. So it cleaned up pretty well compared to what it was, but I think I'm going to replace the piston, and I don't know if I can get a piston without the cylinder. The cylinder came out looking pretty good. I think it's usable. So I'll be shopping for a used piston, at least for 944 or 931 turbo rear brake caliper. Okay, I'm back to working on the brakes on the 924 turbo. I found what I believe is the right piston from a 944 store. So I've ordered that. It has the same part number there as the entire caliper has, which of course is ludicrously expensive. So I'm hoping to get that. In the meantime, since I had the 2 rear wheels off, I decided to paint the lug nuts, and did it in the dark. So it's not very good, but the tops look like they'll be nice and black, so we'll call that a win for now. The other thing I'm doing with the brakes right now is trying to clear out the old brake fluid. And I remembered I had this handy tool from my BMW suppliers, and so I've pumped up 5 or so psi on the tank, and the passenger side rear line blew clear, but the driver's side rear line is not. So I'm just going to leave there's 4 or 5 pounds of pressure on it and see if anything ever comes out of these. I can't see that down there. Comes out of that line overnight. You could pump it up to a lot more, but you risk blowing the reservoir, which of course is old plastic. So I actually had it up to 10 briefly, and then remembered that those reservoirs can blow, and I don't want to do that, so I backed it down to 5. Alright, some status update. This is the bad cylinder from this rear brake, and I could not find it for a 924 turbo, but I had been given a tip that the one for a 944 is the same, and every dimension here that I can see outside of the bag looks like it is the same thing. So I'm going to open it up, maybe do some quick measurements and check, but it's got the same cutouts there for the leading edge. And then I can move to the front brakes. I put these manhole covers on, and in doing so I also noticed that the tie rods were ridiculously loose, so I ordered them. They're not cheap, and they had to come from Europe. Nobody in the States seemed to have them, but they'll probably be here pretty quick based on previous experience with Rose Passion. I'm still waiting on the hose that comes, one of the two hoses that comes off the top of the water pump. But it shipped today, so it should be here hopefully for the weekend. I can get it put together, and that will enable me to install the water pump and then the timing belt, and then maybe actually be able to try to start this bugger. So I'm very much looking forward to that day. But in between then and now and then, I will be rebuilding the front brakes. I think I videoed that already. The rotors are in good shape, but they're locked up. So hopefully it's just the rubber hose needs replaced. All right, so back on the 931 turbo rear brakes. This was the reason why one of the pistons would not flow. There's no brake fluid flowing into the one cylinder. It was this rubber hose. You can not be surprised, I guess, seeing how tight those turns are. Not sure why they did that, but anyway, I had new ones, so I put the new ones on. If you're going to be doing anything with the brake lines, at least on the back, I'm going to get to the fronts yet. You're going to want an 11 millimeter flare wrench, not a box end, a flare wrench. And this is a modified new version. The idea of which is that when you tighten it, then you don't have to pull it off to rotate it back around and slide it back on and rotate it. You can just turn it and rotate, turn it and rotate, which it does pretty well. But you know, when you're on your back and pinched under a car that's just up on jacks, it's very hard to keep it into one plane, and so it's very often coming off one way or the other anyway. And then the bad thing is that you can't use it in this direction. You can only use it in this direction. So if you're going to work on your brakes, get normal. I would say get a normal flare wrench, 11 millimeters. Why it's 11, I don't know. I have like every other size in the book, but not 11, because nobody uses 11, right? Well, this car does. So there's your tips for the day. Okay, I'm moving from the back brakes to the front brakes. Checking out my new, to me, manhole covers. I'm not sure there's enough clearance there with the spacer. Let's see what happens when you set them down. But anyway, moving on to the front brakes. And I was, excuse me one second here, I was momentarily happy when I saw the condition of the front rotor, which is pretty good. Let me get some light on there. Much better than the back ones. The pad thickness looks legit, but I can't hardly turn the thing. So we'll be working with another frozen caliber. Hopefully, if it's anything, it's just the rubber hose back there behind it. Stay tuned, I'll let you know what I find out. Okay, so I'm starting on the front brakes of my 931 Porsche, and look at those pads. They look hardly used. And the rotor, you can see in the background there, is also in good shape. But they were locked up. They would not turn by hand. And so I'm still going to tear these apart and and I'm going to rebuild the calipers. Replace the line, that you can see is pinched off down there with vice grip. And hopefully that will unfreeze them. That is the brake fluid that came out of this front piston. So it is awful in there. Please, people, change your brake fluid. At least like once a decade, if not, I think every 3 years is kind of what I try to follow. But this would be a lot easier and cheaper if this had like ever been changed. Okay, so I think that's a shot of a problem. All the way at the bottom, there's corrosion, and also that big black spot on the side is not rubbing off. I can feel pit in there, so we'll need at least one new cylinder for the front left brake. All right, that should be a wrap on the brakes. I just need to bleed them and we should be good to go. Thanks.